I just feel so
That
bad
was
that
like a
now
yodel.
we're doing this now with our wonderful guests on, that
Yeah,
just have to sit there and
we
go,
used to have
what?
the comfort of just each other, and
Yeah.
now we have a poor soul having to listen in. So and watch us do it. Nadia, I'm so excited that we have you on the podcast.
Thank you.
Oh, this is awesome. So for everybody who I haven't been praising Nadia to, basically I met Nadia back in South Africa when I was there a few months ago. She works for the Stellenbosch Academy of Sport, also known as SAS. I'm just going to call it SAS because that's a very long name.
And it's sassy. What a great, like, where do you
Sassy.
work? Sass.
I got some sass. And she's extraordinary. She's a physiotherapist and you're just remarkable. I swear to God, I came to Nadia with these issues that I've been working on for years. I've had people work on me like consistently on these problems, and she's like, oh wow, you get out of these issues so quickly. Like I can just work you out of these issues. I'm like, what? Literally like 1 or 2 sessions and I was good. And I
Whoa.
like anyone else, I was going for months, and I was like, how, what?
How do we get more sass in our life?
Right.
That's
Can you come
me.
to Canada with me?
Road trip.
Yeah.
Nadia, we're
A
on our way.
flight trip. I don't know what the road trip would look like, but yeah, we need a flight trip to South Africa. So I'm gonna give Nadia's bio, which by the way, you like seriously undersell yourself. So you know, I'm gonna add a little bit of spice there, but I feel like there's so much that I'm probably not even tapping into. But Nadia was actually born in Johannesburg, which is also in South Africa, and is of Greek and Italian heritage. She is currently living in beautiful Stellenbosch and loves hiking, trail running, reading, and good wine. So basically, you found the perfect place in the world to live because that is
Exactly.
Stellenbosch in a nutshell, if no one's been there. Nadia is a sports physiotherapist at the Stellenbosch Academy of Sport, living out her passion every day, which is what we're all about here. She has been a physiotherapist for 15 years, having had the privilege of working with various professional and amateur sports teams and individuals. Nadia is known by some of the most elite athletes in the world. I'm adding this in now because that was her bio. As the woman with the touch that makes grown men cry. And I can personally attest to this, as I have seen these massive people just hobbling out of her room. And I can personally attest to the fact that you are seriously impressive. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's really cool to be here.
Yay! I'm so excited. I wanted to have you just kind of intro us into your physiotherapy journey. Why did you want to get into physio? What did that look like? And did you always know you wanted to work with athletes?
Okay, so that's actually a funny story. I can't remember if I told you that actually when you were in South Africa, but I kind of, biology was my favorite subject at school, which is essentially why I went into something in the healthcare field. And I sort of just picked physio randomly, really. You know, when you're young, medicine sounded like way too long to study at the time. And I was like, well, let's give physio a shot. Yeah, did my physio journey, ended up liking it, thankfully. But the way we train in South Africa is most of your work is practical. The first 2 years is theory, and then your last 2 years are practical, but pretty much in our government hospitals. So 90% of your training is in a hospital setting, and you're working with sort of, you know, orthopedics, which are your broken bones, chest physio, ICU, neuro, which are like your spinal cord injuries and strokes, burns, like pretty much very clinical hospital setting. And the sports side of things, or neuromusculoskeletal, which is like the physio we know mostly, is very little. It's probably like a tenth of what you actually study. So when I qualified, I thought I wanted to be a hospital physio. I loved it. And I did my community service outside of my home. I went to KZN, and then to get back in Gauteng, I actually wanted to stay in government, but there weren't any posts available. So I got a job in a sports practice, sort of just, they were looking for a physio. I had worked there as a student, So they knew of me from working there as a student. We do elective blocks. And I still said to my boss at the time, I don't want to do sports and I don't want to do rugby. I'll see the patients that walk in, and I'd like to please work on a hospital on weekends because that's the direction I want to go in. So you know what I do now, that'll sound
it's like
ridiculous.
Primarily rugby players and
exactly. And so I think by what I can only call grace, she gave me the job, because if you give someone a job who says I don't want to do sports and I'm walking into a sports practice, right? So she gave me a job, and I think ultimately, I just over time kind of chucked in the deep end as well with rugby. She was pregnant at the time, and I had to take over temporarily, cover some of her rugby stuff. And over time, I grew to love it. I still did work in a hospital for 2 years over weekends, and I think what drew me to sport was the challenge, because you constantly have to think about why the person's injured, why they keep getting their pain. You can't just treat the pain. You have to figure out the cause. Otherwise, you'll treat and treat and treat till the cows come home. And if you don't find the cause, it's always going to come back. And that part was constantly challenging. Hospital physio is amazing, and I'm really glad there are people out there whose passion that is. But for me, it was just, a little bit, for lack of a better word, boring.
After a while, maybe, yeah.
And the sports side of things just challenged me to think constantly. And I think that's what I fell in love with.
I have to ask you, why no rugby players? Because right off the bat, you said, I don't want to work with sport or rugby. Why no sport and why no rugby originally?
I think so. I didn't grow up very sporty at all. And I think I was probably intimidated by it, if I'm honest. Like, and also I'd worked in this particular practice for 4 weeks as a student. So I think I knew what I was getting into. So I knew rugby was part of it. So I think I just put the disclaimer out there at the start, like, I don't really want to do rugby. But yeah, it was probably just intimidating. I'm quite a shy, introverted person. And I think kind of going into the sports environment is very opposite to that.
And you were with people who were probably like celebrities in their field, right? Like, pun intended, in their field.
Yeah.
But I find that so interesting, because I feel like you would be the perfect person, because people would come in like in their like all-star mentality, and you're like, I will break you no matter who you are. Like, this, it's a good attitude to have. I'm also really surprised that you mentioned that the person that hired you were like, hello, I'm here at this sports academy and I'm not interested in what you do. No background. Also not going to be here full time because I want to be at a hospital as well. But I'll take the job. You're welcome. Like, what was your resume like? Like, what was this? Were you like, what's that? What,
like a
good
superstar? Like,
yeah. Did you just walk in and say like, I understand everything and I hate this place, but I'll do it?
I think the advantage I had was having worked there as a student. I'm still very much, so is my previous boss, not where I work now, but I'm still very much in contact with her. And what she said to me was, she pretty much hired me for my work ethic. So She remembered as a student, me and one of my colleagues at the time came in, and again, these like shy little girls, not really interested in sport. She gave us a week. She was like, these girls are going to leave after a week. And we stuck it out, and kind of, our willingness to like grind it out and have grit, despite it not being our comfort zone, was kind of the reason I think she actually employed me. I don't know, maybe she had a, voice in her head saying, I think,
do it.
There's something there.
It is interesting, because I think that I have a lot of conversations with a lot of employers in the creative economies, and you cannot train. Actually, a friend of mine, Steph, said this the other day, and Dad says it all the time. You can't train personality. Mm-hmm. So when you want to hire somebody, you want to hire someone that you know is going to be a good person, that's going to have great values, especially if you're in a situation where you have, you know, high impact results that you're looking for, but also high impact people. Like I found that working with, and Raquel, you know this, working in the music industry, like you can't let certain people who are really, really big fans of the industry or the people who you're interacting with, you can't just let them walk
No
into
fangirling, no fanboying.
no, yeah, you can't
Yeah.
you can't necessarily always do that, and that's not to say that those people wouldn't be fine, but you just don't open the door and go, "There's J-Lo." I mean, I would fall on the floor and die of
But also
of
there's
fanness.
like, you can't really see her because she's in a screen, but Nadia's quite tiny. And then she's working on these people who are massive. These like massive athletes. So what's the physical side of that? Like, does that take a really big toll on your body? Because I can only imagine that it would, but I don't know, maybe you have ways of getting through.
Secret powers.
Yeah.
No, I think, yeah, people ask that all the time, and they ask, you know, like, don't your hands get sore? And I think because I'm small, and I actually find this with a lot of other small physios, we often chat about it, and I
There's
think
like a small physio club that you guys are all.
yeah, if you happen to be, because people always comment like, "Oh, wow, you're so strong," like surprise, you know. And all I can think is that because we're small, we're forced to change our technique. So I can't rely just on my hand strength. So I use my body weight. With the bigger guys, I'll lean in with my elbow and my knuckles, and then it doesn't take as much of a toll as you would think, because I'm not constantly using my thumbs only. But I think it's because I'm small, I must have just found a way to use my body to, it's efficiency, I guess.
You're like the jujitsu of physiotherapy.
Yeah.
It's made for small people.
Something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, when people are sore and tight, if you find the right spots, it's actually not too difficult to get in there. And I don't want to say hurt someone in a bad way, but it's not difficult to hurt someone if you found the right spot.
Can you paint me a picture, Nadia? Because I know I just want the layman's version. There are so many different people who work on the physical side of a human being. So tell me what your day actually, like, what does that look like? What manipulations are you doing? Like, what are you looking for? When does someone go and see a physiotherapist, as opposed to a chiropractor or other things? Like, what is it that you do? Why do you get the job?
Do you mean for athletes, or do you mean for like
I'd like to know
people?
good question. I'd like to know for normal, like not normal, everyday people, not non-athlete humanoids, and then these, like, you know, these athletes. I would like to know both.
We'll do that after.
Yeah. Okay. I'm jumping ahead. Sorry.
No. Yes.
So I think the principles are actually similar, regardless of the level of performance. But and it's always tricky. Like, I'm obviously biased towards physio, so chiros are great, bios are great. Like, there's a place for every health professional, and some people click with certain health professionals better than others. I know people who love their chiro, and you know,
I love that pun. Can we just stop for a second? That was such a great pun. I click with my chiro real well.
I was like, what is the pun? I'm missing.
Yeah, I also didn't know.
It was your pun. The accidental puns are the best. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted. Please.
No problem. So I actually think part of what makes you good at what you do is your connection with your client. But ultimately, I think we look for movement dysfunction. So someone will come in with pain, and we have various assessments to figure out A, what is wrong, and then B, where's it coming from. So you kind of look at movements, and I think most people are either injured or sore because something isn't working and something is working too hard, and you need to figure out that imbalance. So there's always a give and a restriction, we call it. So often the pain is where the give is. So that's the part that's working too hard or moving too much because something somewhere else is stuck. So our role is to come in and unstick the stuck part, loosen up, mobilize, stretch, kind of, you know, all sorts of tricks that we have to get that loose, and then strengthen the part that's not working. And I think this is kind of our philosophy at SAS amongst all of our physios. You pretty much need the whole picture to be effective. So you can't just stretch and you can't just strengthen. There are all these trends going out all the time, like mobility, 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 and then strength, strength, strength. But to be honest, it doesn't help if you're mobile, if you're not strong, and vice versa. So kind of strengthen what's weak, loosen up what's tight, and then get the body moving the way it's supposed to move. Within that, we focus hugely on rehab. So we're not just hands-on, kind of, which is great because you then empower your patient to kind of fix themselves, really. This isn't always for someone. So your non-athlete type of people are more likely to just come and get a loosen up sort of regularly. People who have like an outcome or a goal or are more athletic or professional will probably want to do more work on their own. I always tell people, you know, you spend half an hour with me and you spend 12 to 16 hours with yourself. So a lot of what you do is just as important. And then there's this concept we have, it's an orthopedic surgeon we work with who taught us this concept. It's basically called the envelope of function. And each person has their own envelope of function. So if you work within that, you're probably not going to get sore or injured. But we all push our boundaries. So, you know, I'm comfortable running a 6K, but I want to try run a 12K and then I can't walk the next day. So we kind of try and help bridge that gap and make people strong enough to do what they want to do. And I think that's where the athletic population comes in. You know, you work with your high performance teams. I can't give them 3 sets of 10 of an easy exercise. I need to make sure that their rehab is difficult enough that when they go and do what they do on the field, that's not going to break them. So kind of this balance between working really hard and on the edge, but in a safe way. I think that's pretty much in a nutshell what we do.
And I just have to say that I love so much. I mean, so I've played so many sports. I've been in so many different physical things, whether it's like some of them are a little bit more chill, like yoga, you would think anyways, but that does take quite a bit on the body as well. And then a lot of kickboxing and everything in between. I've done running and you name it, I've tried it. And one of the big things that I found a few years ago, I was doing a bunch of sports at once and I have flat feet, and I had gone to a specialist because I had lost my orthotics years before and I was having a lot of problems. And I said, you know, I just want to get like a new orthotic or something because I guess speaking of the envelope, like I was trying to push outside of my envelope, trying to do all of these things at once. And he basically just told me, he's like, well, that's basically just going to be kind of too much for you. So you just have to let go of some of your sports. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? Like, that's never gonna happen. I'm never gonna let go of some of these. And then, you know, like I researched and I looked up all these things and I found out that there's exercises you can do. I didn't know them specifically. So when I went to South Africa, I'd asked Nadia, I was like, can you give me some exercises for my feet? Because I would do certain exercises at the gym or in yoga, especially balancing poses on one foot. And I would just have like burning up my shin. It was just like a fire had roared up my shins. And Nadia was able to identify that and say, you know, that's because those muscles aren't being activated until I'm in those poses. Like I kind of had like, I guess they were chilling for the rest of the time. So she gave me some exercises, and Nadia, I have been working on them. I've been using them at the gym.
What are they? You have to teach them to me because I have flat feet.
Do you have flat feet too?
Yeah, I have really flat feet, and I think that's a really common, like, what is it? People say collapsed arches.
Yeah.
And so when I run, like, I love running, but I'm on a treadmill, and I'm like this, and I had to stop because I've hurt the side of my foot, and it feels like there's some kind of hairline fracture. But flat feet, you get those shooting pains. That's a common one.
Yeah, very common. And I think that one of the tricks with that is you don't, because you can have a dropped arch and not necessarily have a flat foot. So people think if your foot is not like physically flat on the ground, I don't have a flat foot per se, but they don't often realize that when they stand on one leg, they arch actually still drop. So you might appear to have a normal looking foot, but under load, your arch actually does drop down. So it's what we call foot core. Basically, stabilizing component of your body has its own core, and you kind of work the little muscles, which is the trick to that. So yeah, we must definitely try to teach you that.
Maybe we'll have to do a YouTube video and I can show you. But there are exercises that literally anyone could do. Like you can just use a tennis ball, you can use a little cloth, you can do them inside your house, you can do them at the gym while you're doing, presses or lunges. And I don't know, for me, I can tell you just off doing them for the last couple months. And I haven't been doing them every single day, I'll be honest, but I do them every single day that I'm at the gym, which is quite often. And I have been very cognizant of my activation, because then also I'm getting more and more used to using those muscles, which means when I'm doing normal things like walking or going upstairs, I'm, remembering, it's like a little trigger. Okay,
that
step
awareness,
from, yeah, right? Like step from the ball. Okay, good. So I think that's amazing. What are some other really common weekend warrior injuries you see? So like not the high performance athletes, but the people who love to go hard but work 9 to 5s and are probably sitting most of the day.
I think probably lower leg injuries are the most common, like ITB, if I just throw out something, just pain on the side of your knee. And it comes from exactly that, like sitting all day, and then going out and trying to make your body work in a completely different position. I have the saying that if you give your glutes half a chance to go on holiday, they'll go on holiday. So many people just have underactive glutes, and it's not necessarily a case of the glutes being weak, because if you cue them or test their strength, they can function. We can, we all stand upright, we all walk and run. So our glutes aren't really weak, but they are just chilling, like you said. They kind of, if I don't have to work, I'm not going to work. And then what happens is your lower back or your ITB or other muscles try and compensate for that. So like lower back pain, knee pain, it's probably the most common thing we see. And I think the idea behind it is that we're made to move. So it's sitting is not the problem. It's that you're only sitting. So, little things like that, because there's a big trend to standing desks these days. But if you stand for 12 hours a day, it's also not ideal. So sort of like making sure you are kind of moving as much as possible in your day, giving your muscles a chance to activate and move. And if you have to sit at a desk all day, then do some kind of prep before you go out and run. Kind of wake those muscles up and tell them, okay, cool, I'm going to go for a run now. I'm going to go to the gym. So I need you to work, because they've just been lazy all day. I think that's probably the most common.
How would you wake them up? Like, what would cue them to wake up? Because that was actually going to be one of my questions to you. I think glutes is a really difficult one. I also think when I was training women, funny enough, core was a difficult one. Like they would think that they're doing core, but they wouldn't actually activate the core. Now I think core's kind of brought its time to shine, but in terms of glutes, I do think that is a hard one for people to even realize that they're activating. So what's a good exercise? Like a lot of people talk about squats, but I oftentimes think people can go into their quads and hamstrings for squats too and not activate as much. So what are some good things that they could do to activate and feel that they're activating and learn that feeling?
Yeah, so I think that you've exactly hit the nail on the head. It's that awareness of not actually being able to feel what your muscle is doing. So if you can get someone, like say you come to me and then I teach you, okay, do an exercise, and then I show you that you're actually doing that exercise without using your glutes at all, and you'll be like, oh my word, my glute's not even working. And then so you literally just tense your glute, like kind of squeeze your butt together, feel that it's working, or contracting rather during an exercise. So like you say, if you do a squat, you can completely do a squat without your glutes, or most exercises. So there are a few exercises that work really well just to get them firing. So there's one called a pen pickup, which is basically just like bending down like you want to pick up a pen. But again, how you do it is important. So
oh my gosh. Is it like the bend and snap from Legally Blonde?
Oh, yeah. Almost, yeah, pretty much almost like that.
Snap.
Almost exactly like that. Exactly. But you need to snap with your butt and not your
snap with your
back.
butt. I love it.
Right. Butt snaps.
Yeah. So that cueing, you can literally poke your butt cheek, because your brain works through sensory feedback. So kind of, squeezing your glutes, if you can't get it to squeeze, like poke it, like tell your brain what area you're wanting to do. You can sit at your desk and try and squeeze. And if you want to make it even harder, try squeeze your left and your right separately from each other. So those are all little tricks.
I'm trying to do it right now. I'm like, wait.
I'm doing it.
Are you? I can't squeeze one ass cheek and not the other. Like, sorry, what? How? I'm gonna poke the side of my right ass cheek right now and be like, hello.
Squeeze.
Exactly. But then it does nothing. Like, I'm just. Everyone do this. Everyone do this right now. Just hit the left side now. Now try and squeeze just the left side. Is anything happening for any of you?
Yes.
You can start with both. Start with both if you can't get them. But basically, you're wiring that pattern from your muscle to your brain, and that's the key to activation. Is just getting you to be aware of switching it on, basically. So then, when you go to the gym and you do your squat or you do your bridge, being conscious of like switching it on, using my glutes, don't use my lower back, do the exercise. And over time, it's there are three words that we use. So it's cognitive is the first one. So you have to think about it really hard, and it feels more like a brain exercise than anything else, like trying to get it working. So cognitive, and then associative is when you start to kind of do it more habitually. And over time, it will become more automatic. So you'll go into that movement pattern and you'll engage naturally. Like Raquel said, with her walking upstairs, you can now feel she activates her feet better. But it's from doing that pattern over and over and over again and kind of wiring that connection to your brain that, okay, this is the muscle that needs to work at this time, is probably the key to like activating.
And you do forget it too. Like if you don't keep it up, if you don't do it for a year or two, because I think at one point I was decent with it and then I stopped for some reason and I did lose it. Like I had to retrain my brain to do it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I was going to just say on the end of that, is that feeding into, I have a lot of friends who say to me, like, I'm working out 40 minutes, 50 minutes. I'm not losing weight or I'm not seeing the difference. Is it worth them going to a physio to kind of share just like proactively their health goals and actually work out how to activate the muscles that they're talking about? The reason I'm asking is because I immediately thought of like the 4-minute workout, or, you know, these workouts where you don't need to do it for an hour, 2 hours at a time. It sounds like what's happening is a lot of people, myself probably included, are working out but not activating these muscles, so not seeing the results that you're wanting to see. So is it worth going? Is it worth going to a physiotherapy and just therapist and saying, these are my types of workouts, run me through the right way and what's being activated so I can start my awareness journey rather than just doing, right?
Exactly, yeah. And that's the thing. Often all it is that awareness. And if you can apply the awareness to one muscle, you can then sort of apply it to any workout that you do, but just kind of learning how to make that connection. Like,
right.
Even if we use core as an example, everybody says they can do core, but sit-ups and planks are not core really. So again, which muscles are you using? Because our bodies will cheat if you give them half a chance. They'll use the big global muscles, and not the stabilizing ones. So yeah, definitely. And it's one session really, just to either, but I don't know who you'll have overseas. Like we work with biokineticists in South Africa who will do a similar thing. Yeah, probably like some kind of trainers or yeah, they're great. Yeah, they'll do the exact same thing. So just, you always have to have a purpose and a why. Like, why are you doing something? And we kind of help bridge that gap of which muscles are you actually trying to work, and then we teach you how to do that. Yeah, definitely.
And I think also with those 4-minute workouts, personally, I'm not a big fan. I'm a deep kind of a work person, so everything that I do, I go deep. But partly that's also because a lot of those workouts I find work very specific muscles. Like in 4 or 10 minutes, you can't work your whole body very well. It's very unlikely you're going to, which means if you're repeatedly doing your favorite workouts that are 4 to 10 minutes, you're probably doing the same muscles over and over, and then you're going to result with an imbalance, and then you're going to get soreness. So also bodies for weight loss and everything, you can't spot train. So it's kind of pointless. Like if you're working your upper body, it's going to work for fat loss on your lower body as well. It's not like you're just going to, lose fat from your upper body. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind there. But before we navigate too far from this, I just thought of a question for you that I hadn't thought of before, but I wanted to get your opinion on this because you also work with female athletes. And just so you guys know, at SAS, they're probably, I don't know, in my opinion, best known for rugby, but they have athletes from all over the world in all different disciplines coming to them to train there. So they're an incredible facility. And you work with a lot of female athletes as well. I remember talking to a physio a long time ago, and I never got to kind of fact check this on my end, but she was talking about how a lot of women are not, I don't know how to explain this best, so I'm just going to put it out there, and then you can maybe make this make more sense to me. But basically, the muscles that you're using for Kegels, it's like your internal core. She was saying a lot of women don't actually use those when they're doing core. So even within athletes, they were finding they have 6 or 8 pack abs, and physically they looked good, but then their internal core, either they were getting injuries or incontinence or like different issues because these really important stability muscles weren't being worked. And I just wanted to ask you about that. Is that something that you've seen, and how can that happen, and how can people stop that from happening?
Yeah, we do come across it. Not so much in the athletes we see, but I think just because our female athletes are quite young still. So the pelvic floor issues tend to come later on in life. But we have a lot of private patients who are moms or, pre or postpartum, that we definitely see it with. And again, it's just learning how to activate the stabilizers. So it's easy to tense and to clench, and those are the big muscles that are working. So exactly what we spoke about earlier with the glutes and the feet, basically just finding that low threshold core, learning how to activate it. But it's exactly that. It's really, really deep abdominal core, and then your pelvic floor. And those muscles should actually be working 24/7. So it's a very light, let's call it a 20 to 30% contraction that should be able to be sustained over time. So as you're sitting doing anything, even just sitting, not necessarily exercising, you should be able to activate it, and it should stay on all the time. So I think the mistake we all make is we over clench, which is not a healthy way to train your stabilizers, because they need to work at a very low level over a long period of time. So kind of more endurance than actual strength. And again, it's just that cueing of facilitating them to use the right muscles and switch off the big muscles. But it's quite difficult to do unless you are hands-on with someone and you're telling them which ones not to work, try this, try that. You can, there are a whole lot of phrases you can use to try and build the analogy in the brain of how to get those muscles working properly. We do it with the guys as well for deep core stabilization, because we see a lot of lower back, overactive lower backs, not because of the pelvic floor necessarily, but that your transversus abdominis, which is your deep core. So that's pretty across the board. I was going to say something else with that. Maybe it'll come back to me.
So how, like, if someone is listening to this podcast and they're like, I think I have that issue, I've never been able to do a Kegel, or I don't know, what would help them identify that they're using that muscle? Because I think a lot of people will clench their butt. That's a big thing. So how would you be able to know that you're using the right muscle?
So I think, I remember what I was going to say. You get pelvic floor and women's health, and actually men's health specialists now. So a lot of physios go specifically into women's health, and that's all they do. So those are, if you're really struggling with, like, your end of spectrum incontinence, post-pregnancy, or that kind of thing, I think seeing a specialist in that field is probably key. Because you can also actually get spasm in a lot of those muscles, specifically in the females. Kind of those internal muscles can go into spasm and then cause you not to be able to activate them. And it's a whole different field of physio that people are doing amazing work in. But yeah, I think it's basically like the cues that we use are to think of your spine as a sponge. So you're thinking like really deep. You want to think of your spine as a sponge and kind of pull your belly button in towards your spine. And then you almost want to pull your pelvic floor up towards you as if you are trying to stop your urine midstream. And I think that will probably be the cue to make you pull your pelvic floor in rather than squeeze your butt. So if you imagine that you're on the toilet and you're weeing and you need to stop like halfway, those are kind of the muscles that you are thinking of. So sort of if you think where your bladder is, and then like the saddle underneath that's what you want to pull up. And you can use a max contraction to get them to activate the first time. So say, okay, so squeeze that as hard as you can, kind of as a reference point, and then now try and squeeze 20% of that. And then they should feel that like low level clenching, but kind of more where your bladder would be, like spine bladder, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and then at the same time, check that their abs are not overacting. So then do your pelvic floor, and then your abs should still be quite soft. If you're bracing with your six pack or your abs, then you've gone too far. So then you need to try and relax the top part and just contract below your belly button, nothing above your belly button.
I want to know if anyone wasn't trying that.
I'm so quiet.
I was like, no one can
I'm
listen to that and not try as you're talking.
I think as I'm talking, I'm even doing it.
I totally was too. All of our faces are like
yeah, everyone just stopped. Yeah, got it.
So if you can't do that on your, and I'm sure there are tons of YouTube videos now on all this stuff, but if you can't do it, then try see somebody who can just help facilitate, a little bit more of that muscle activation.
Oh, I love that. Okay, I also wanted to ask you about mental grit, because I think you have to see a lot of that, especially in what you're doing, from everything from working in the hospital with, burn victims or people who are just getting out of surgery, to athletes who really have identified as one thing as an athlete and then are going through injuries. Sometimes they're re-injuring, sometimes they're having to go into surgery and get off the field. And I think there's a lot of mental game that goes into that. You have to be very resilient. And I wanted to ask you about what you're seeing with the people that you're working with, if there's anything that's a common thread across everyone that people are able to basically pull into that grit?
From our patient's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tricky one. I think it's something you learn along the way. I actually said this to someone this week. It's the one thing they don't teach you really well as a physio when you're training, is to deal with like the psychological aspect of pain and injury. And the brain is such a big part of how we perceive anything. So yeah, I think how you as a therapist interact and how you get a message across is very important. Education is also very important. So helping your patients understand the facts without it sounding scary, because I think a lot of the mental stuff comes from the fear behind it. So we see a lot of fear avoidance where they hold back either just day-to-day stuff, like, you know, people in pain don't want to go to the gym or go for a walk because they're scared it's going to make them sore. They're scared they're going to get re-injured. So I think the underlying factor is fear, really. So trying to break that is probably the most important. And we do that through like education and positive reinforcement. So, you know, the body is actually quite an amazing thing. So explaining that you are going to feel things long before you're actually going to get injured. Obviously, there's like traumatic events, and you know, if you break your leg, you break your leg. But a lot of the time, your body reacts a little bit before you're actually going to get injured. Like if you touch a hot stove, it's hot long before you get a burn, and that's your brain's way of protecting yourself from actually getting the burn. So you kind of creep into that psychology of understanding pain and injury, and try and get the athlete or the patient to understand that not everything is negative. I think that's probably my strategy. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
I think it's really interesting I just want to go back to that piece where you're like, you know, fear is really the big dictator of your recovery journey or your proactive journey, right? And I think that's a really huge thing that you're saying, like on both sides of, you know, physiotherapists not getting that mental training necessarily to deal with someone on their mental side, because you're dealing with like high level traumas down to people who are like, who have gotten multiple concussions and are basically saying, am I ever going to be able to play rugby again? You obviously know these techniques, but if there is someone at home that's like, okay, I've got this injury or I've got this thing that's preventing me from working out, how could you give them some kind of tool immediately, like a little trick that helps them to understand? Because it's so easy to be like, oh, we'll help you work through the fear. But some people can't afford, they don't know who to go to. They don't know how to approach their wellness and their path to recovery. So if you, and it's a really tough question, but if you were to say to someone who wants to get back onto a fitness journey, who is worried about a recovery thing, what would be one way where you'd be like, you know what, just here's a little gem, just remember this thing?
Yeah. Okay, so obviously injuries are very different, and there could be some serious injuries out there that actually need to get checked, so this doesn't apply to that population. But basically the body tolerates adaptation really well. So if you gradually load it in small bits over time, it will adapt. The easy thing is to stay short of your pain. So if doing a squat to 90 degrees is painful, but doing a squat to 45 degrees isn't, then squat to 45 degrees. And then try squat to 60 degrees, and then try squat to 80 degrees. And as you get stronger over time, the body loves load, the correct amount of load. Even I mean, even bone heals by loading. You know, there's a big trend now with how, like, long ago you had an injury, you rested. Now you actually don't rest much at all. There are cases where, you know, you have complete ligament tears and fractures that do need healing time, but our body heals through the right amount of load. So I think for the lay person, if it's not painful, you can do it. And then if there is pain, then you need to know what pain is dangerous pain and what pain isn't. So that's maybe where you need the help of a professional just to kind of identify that. But you should be fairly safe if you are working outside of your pain and then slowly adapting over time. So do a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. Yeah.
And I love that idea of saying, you know, if it's painful and it's like a constant pain, like you can go in this country, you can go to your doctor, you can ask for a referral. And I think I see a lot of friends who, for some reason, don't want to put weight onto the medical system in order to, and a lot of them happen to be women who are like, oh, it'll be okay, I'll be all right. And it's actually, it is everyone that I speak to. But going and getting a referral is really important if you really feel like it's preventing you from becoming a fit and healthy person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much value in just knowing what's wrong. So even if it's just that one appointment to find out, like, is it serious? Is it not serious? How much can I do? You know, it doesn't mean you need to go for 20 appointments. If you're going for 20 appointments, then something probably isn't right anyway. But yeah, just there's no harm in knowing what is wrong, because, you know, so often we also see it, like, again, coming back to the fear or the unknown. The minute you tell somebody what their injury is, they completely relax about it. But it's that, like, oh, why am I sore? Like, why does this keep getting sore? Why is that? Why is that? The minute you, like, people just want to know what's wrong. So if I tell you it's your ITB, then the next time they run and it's sore, they're like, oh, it's fine, it's my ITB, you know? So again, just that kind of peace of mind of what is wrong. I mean, the medical systems are there to use them. So diagnosis is really important, I think.
So Nadia is the gatekeeper to people playing, just to give everyone the heads up. So if Nadia says someone's not fit to play, they do not play. I'm imagining that you have to be a very smart lady to be able to see through when people are hiding injuries, because I think sometimes, yes, there's big injuries where, you know, it's just clear someone can't play, and then other times maybe it would be best for them not to play, but there's a big game and there's other reasons they really feel they need to play. How do you assess that when, I mean, I would have imagined you would have to go off people's pain tolerance and them telling you, okay, this hurts, this doesn't. What do you do to kind of assess that? And then do you ever have to work with people mentally to say, you know, we're gonna get you there, and kind of handhold them, because I'm sure there's frustrations that come up when they can't play?
Yeah, I think when you tell an athlete or anyone who loves exercising that they can't exercise, it's probably the biggest mistake you can make. So a lot of what we do is allow them to do as much as they can do outside of their injury. So flat out resting should never be an answer. And often that's a way you can gain their trust. Like, okay, cool, I'm going to let you train, but this is what you're going to do. So if you have a leg injury, you work really hard on your core, your upper body, vice versa. So that's obviously in the injured state. If it's something that is, you always kind of play between, is it a serious injury and can I make this worse if I play? Or is it not a serious injury and it's just something that's painful and it's, you know, it's not going to get worse over time, it's not going to affect my performance. So those are the ways we kind of look at it. but your patient has to have buy-in in a controlled system. So in our rugby teams where you have, the medical system pretty much has authority. If the medical team says they can't play, the coach won't play the player. It's more difficult with your outside patients who you advise them what to do, but now they must go to their school coach. Their school coach is putting pressure on them. Their parents putting pressure on them. Those are the harder ones because you need to convince them to make the decision. Whereas like with our rugby teams, if I say no, it's no. And they can be upset with you and, that's what it is. But you try and, there's sort of two things. It's pain. You don't always have to be pain-free, but is it affecting your form? So are you going to develop another injury because of it? If you play this game and you make it worse, are you going to be out for longer? So sacrifice 2 weeks of recovery or make it worse and then you're out for 3 months or 4 months or 6 months. And 99% of the time, they will say, okay, no, because they know they don't want to sit out for longer. So they will kind of sacrifice the short period of recovery. So kind of, are you going to make the injury worse is a big factor. And then also help them to understand the bigger picture because they don't always see past today. So, okay, you really want to play this game, but what have you got next week or what have you got in 6 months? And is that not more important for you to be ready for? Do you still want to have pain then where we can actually just fix it now if you're willing to rest for X amount of time? And then the last part of that is performance. If they are sore, injured, they're not going to perform at their best. And often they don't think about that. And if you plant that seed and make them realize that they're going to look rubbish on the field if they play, then you kind of come to that, you need their trust and you kind of come to that decision together. But those are sort of the points you put out there to kind of get that decision on the right side.
I love that. And that actually brings me to rest days because I know back in the day when I started working out, there was this big, and it wasn't for sports necessarily, but I see this a lot in gym culture. There's kind of like your active days and especially within the 9-to-5 culture or 9-to-5 work programs, but people will work out 5 days a week. So it's like the days that they're going to their job, they're going to the gym, they'll go super hard, and then they'll have Saturday and Sunday be their off day. And I see this in diets too. It's like, these are my cheat days, which drives me nuts. But anyways, that's a different podcast episode. But on rest days, especially when I look at big gym goers and bodybuilders and things like that, it'll be full on like laying on the couch, not moving. And there's this association with rest being like you don't do anything. But I think that can also be really dangerous if you're working out a lot and at a high level, because then everything's kind of tightening up and you're not using them. And then, Monday comes and you start going just as hard as you did on Friday. And I think a lot of micro injuries can happen. But I wanted to get your take on that. Like, what does rest look like? Should we just be laying there, or should we be doing active rest, or what should people be doing for their weekly workout routines?
So I think it's very dependent on what your workout is like, or your routine is like. But we have a term called relative rest and active recovery. So I think if you're going really, really hard on a Monday and a Tuesday, then dropping your load on a Wednesday could also be seen as rest. Some form of rest is important. So I think completely lying on a couch for 2 days straight is probably not ideal. But not working out on those days, I think is fine, because your body loads and recovers. So you actually do need some rest days to get the maximum out of your workout, rather than just going like straight to get those people who don't believe in rest days at all. But I think relative rest is probably more beneficial. So you work out really hard, and then your rest day is like lower load, or a bit of a flush out, or cardio, or if you normally run, then you swim. something that takes the load off your body, but still allows you to exercise a little.
Okay. So would a walk be considered relative rest? Okay. Or yoga, I guess, like a chill yoga class might be. Okay.
I like that. I love those two statements, relative rest and active recovery. I think relative rest, I love that question, Raquel, because it's often, for me as well, growing up and playing so many different sports, you can get myths in your mind of what, and one thing stays in your mind and you're like, well, I'm not doing that. Or what did you say earlier? And it was like, this is a total myth. It's a myth that these things are, that you can't recover, or that you're activating your core when you've got abs, like just all these little things. And Raquel and I are both big fans of, I'll say tiny, shiny changes being the most important thing. And creating that awareness around it is so important. So yeah, active recovery. So sorry, what is active recovery and what is
relative rest?
Relative rest. Like, give me two examples, because we know walking or yoga is relative rest. What's an example of an active recovery?
So active recovery will be things like, so like with our rugby guys, they have 2 or 3 field sessions and a gym session a day. So on their off day, they work hard.
Meanwhile, I'm sitting on the couch with my crisps, like living my best life.
So they could probably lie flat on their rest day. But active recovery would be something like getting into a swimming pool and doing some stretches, or moving around. Actually, they actually get into a pool at the end of every hard day. We had some games yesterday, and after the game session, instead of going for passive recovery, which would be like a massage or recovery pump, where you just lie down and kind of have some form of recovery like that, you're actively moving. So you could get on a bike and just do a light spin for 10 minutes, stretches in a pool, some stretching, that kind of thing is what we call active recovery. So you're helping your body recover from your load, but with intention and some kind of active movement, but very low load.
Mm-hmm. That actually reminds me, I wanted to ask you about some of the newest kind of methods and tech that you're seeing in recovery for athletes, because I think a lot of weekend warriors as well get really excited about this, and taking on new things. So one of the things I keep hearing about are all these people doing ice baths, in their homes. They're building these like weird tubs of ice baths, and I know athletes have done that for a long time. I know red light therapy is something that I'm seeing pop up everywhere, but I want to know, because I'm assuming what you guys are doing with your athletes are probably like the top of what is being recommended. So what are some of the like higher end new things that people are doing in the athletic world?
I think so. The 2 popular things at the moment are your sort of like active compression. So you get compression garments. So like the recovery pump and Normatec are the different brands, but it's like these boots that you put your entire like legs and torso into, and they pump up, and they like link to a little engine, I suppose it is, and it like compresses and relaxes. So you're kind of getting, ultimately ultimately, recovery is about increasing blood flow to the muscle. So that is quite popular, and I think the guys like that quite a lot. So kind of you get the compression, relax, compress, relax, pump action, and then you get technology that has that with ice. So more specifically for an injury than recovery, then you get compression together with ice therapy for pain, and then those massage guns are very popular at the moment. So sort of again, either for recovery or for like preparation, like before a game, like warm up your muscles, increase blood flow, kind of, and you can choose your intensity and how hard you go and that kind of thing. But basically bringing blood flow to the muscle, warming it up, that kind of thing. All the other stuff is every year the list of like what is better than something else constantly changes. So there's been ice baths, there's massages. Active recovery is probably the one that tops generally across the board. The muscle pumps, the guns, but there's also a big move towards nutrition and sleep being very important for recovery, like almost more than all those other things, actually.
Please talk about that. I concur. Tell us about why that's so important.
So, so without going into like the in-depth physiology behind it, which I probably need to look up myself, to be honest, but I think if you have the right nutrients at the right time, so I don't know if you follow endurance sport, they say the best recovery drink is a chocolate milkshake because it has the right amount of carb and protein. So the guys did that for quite a long time. I think some people are still doing it. But basically replenishing what your body needs to do its job. And a lot of foods are pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory. So if your body can be in a better nutritional state, it can recover better, it can heal better, it can do what it needs to do. Because we're actually made to heal if we're in a good state. And I think sleep just comes with that. If you're tired, your nervous system isn't working properly, you're not concentrating, you're at more risk of injury, where we all know we need sleep to be efficient, and that translates into like the physical realm and physical activity as well. That's pretty much the non-scientific version.
How much sleep do we need?
I actually looked it up the other day because I love sleep and I'm not a morning person. And I'm like, I want Google to tell me I need 12 hours of sleep a day. But I think, so 7 to 9 hours a day seems to be what's needed. And if you have a very physically demanding job or career, you probably need the 8 or 9 more than the 7. So I think 7 to 9 is the average. I think less than 7, you over a long period of time, you're probably gonna hit a wall.
I'm laughing because a year and a half ago, my average sleep for I think like 4 months was like 4 to 5 hours. My sleep thing just kept telling me like, oh good, I reached 5 hours this time. And I think I lost my personality completely. Like it took me a month or 2 solid of normal sleeping patterns before I was like, oh, I'm a functioning human. I have feelings and thoughts.
It's amazing. Yeah.
I love that, going back to that whole the big picture thing. As we navigate designing a life that we want, it's so easy to get decision fatigue about where you go to do things, who you go and speak to. I'm so grateful. The other day someone messaged about the show and they were like, I'm so glad that I can just be here and absorb this information while I'm on my way to work. But really what I'm hearing you say is it's a really holistic thing. You need to increase your education about your body in whatever way you can. And there are so many free resources. You need to not be afraid to get in touch with an expert. And like you said, be able to say, I just want to do this. If you're not injured, it's great to go to a physiotherapist. I'm like, this is what I want to go and do, is take that piece, go to a nutritionist, take that piece and go, finally read that sleep book that everyone keeps talking about, and start to put together your wellness, but really being curious and raising that awareness that you talked about, and then being ready to debunk the myths is, I think, a really big thing for everyone to kind of take away from today.
And understand your body, because everyone's different.
Right.
You're not gonna find a quick fix solution on the internet, because your friend's gonna try that and it's gonna be amazing, and you're gonna try it and it's not. So don't be scared to kind of find out what works for you.
Yeah.
So on that note, a quick question about that. Would you recommend, if people wanted to kind of optimize their life on the physical side and their workouts and things like that, that even if they didn't have an injury, they could come into a professional and say, hey, I just want to know, I'm about to do like a hard push into whatever the sport is that they're interested in, or, you know, their own physical activity, and say, what are kind of my weak spots? What do I need to work on? Because I know we talked about balances and things like that. And then just to kind of get a program started, it's like a prehab program.
Exactly. I was just going to say, we do a ton of prehab, like injury prevention. So like between us and our bios have a huge number of clients that just come for, you can either come and get a program and just get guidance around the kind of things you need to work on, or come and work with us weekly and kind of just stay on top of staying strong so that you don't get injured. Yeah, we do a ton of that. So you definitely don't have to be injured to see one of us.
I love that. I think I would highly recommend that. I know when I started work, so caveat, my fiance, he is the one who went to SAS, and then that's how I met Nadia. And he introduced me to everything because you guys are all wonderful. But, you know, I think a big difference in my workout routine of going to SAS, because I also was doing some training there, is there was a huge emphasis on balance. There was a huge emphasis on, you know, the small muscles and things like that. And that was a really big change that now I've incorporated into every workout. Like, I don't do a workout anymore without doing some level of balancing, some level of working on those small muscles. And I think that alone has already really helped me in the prehab state. But I think, yeah, going and being able to get that assessment if you have the means is awesome. I think that'll really help move you forward in your fitness journey.
Yay. And my brain is full. My brain is like, okay,
we said all the things.
We have lots
Nadia,
of things.
Of information.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you so much, because I think this is you know, as we move, all these puns are coming from everywhere. As we move into, you know, this next season on this side of the world, it starts to get a little bit warmer. You start to the sun comes out, you know. It's really important to kind of set yourself up for success. And I just think that there are a lot of really great things that we talked about today that are just little seedlings that can sit there and grow in your brain and glutes.
Exactly.
Seeds for your glute brains. Nadia, thank you so much for spending this time with us. It's been just so eye-opening. And I will tell you when Raquel and I are on a plane to go and get our ass cheeks prodded by you.
Yes. Definitely come and visit.
Oh, thank you so much, Nadia.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye.
Thanks for listening, bombshells. In order to continue to elevate, subscribe and don't forget to click that little bell so you can get notified every time we have a new badass brunch. Until next time, stay focused, fierce, and fabulous.